All right, we are back with more NFL coverage. In this one, we have a few developments to get into. So to get straight into it, the Commanders earlier last week would sign Treylon Burks to their practice squad with the absences of both McLaurin and Samuel Sr. They're probably going to have to deploy him at some point, but I don't think that he was ever called up from there. Something they should strongly be considering, though. They genuinely need the wide receiver help, all the wide receiver help they can get, even if you may still have your questions about Burks, or at least consider him to be just a commodity that we know enough about at this point to understand that he might not be able to ever reach that kind of status as even a solid, a serviceable wide receiver in the NFL. No matter what, they're taking a chance on him. Marvin Harrison Jr. during the Packers game would be in concussion protocol, and I didn't watch it live. I can imagine that he wouldn't have been able to return because that's kind of the new rule that they have. Once you're set and placed in there, and I guess they rule that you've suffered one, you're just going to go straight out of the game. You're not going to be able to return. Seeing as his production was kind of limited anyways, even without watching, I just have to believe that they did not let him enter the game again. Although he definitely would have wanted to try to come back in there. At the end of the day, they're just trying to keep the players safe. So it is what it is. All right. For a couple of other injuries, Trevon Diggs was out for the Commanders game due to injury, but they didn't really need his services all that much. David Njoku would also be out of the game against the Dolphins due to a knee injury, and as unfortunate as that is, also given the fact that there were reports, a different NFL article, .com article mentioned that he was apparently in trade rumors as well prior to the trade deadline. So, I don't know if he'd even be willing to leave, or if the Browns are just trying to get enough value out of him, see what they have, and then try to make some sort of decision on the rest of his time with the team, or if they want to ship him elsewhere. But either way, I don't know. I guess that could be happening. Like, they've been involving Harold Fannin Jr. way more as a player on this team than Njoku, and he's clearly got the advantage of experience and also just being a better tight end at this point in time than Fannin Jr. does. But again, that hasn't stopped him from receiving more of a focus. And in this Dolphins game, as far as we were concerned, honestly, they didn't really need him all that much in this one. They just beat the absolute shit out of him. So they ended up being more than okay without him. Man. A.J. Dillon would be given a DNP decision prior to the start of the game against the Vikings and just simply not play. And then some very interesting news would come out yet again via the ESPN ticker, but also per multiple reports, because, man, it would be detailed by all of these sources that Doug Martin on Sunday passed away at the age of 36. And again, it's just wild to consider that stuff when you're in the moment and you're seeing that go down. Because by the time that I saw it, the news had come out like a half hour or so earlier, but I didn't hear anything about it. So from my perspective, it just came out of the blue, and it was definitely just quite the unfortunate situation to hear about. It was definitely shocking. And with Doug Martin being out of the NFL for all this time, and again, yes, the circumstances around this are very weird, and we'll get to that in a second. But from the I guess, most hardcore NFL fan, or even if you're a Bucks fan who was watching football around the time that Doug Martin was in the league, well, your first memories of him in hearing about this passing, you're going to look back on his time in the NFL and with the team. Because, even with some of what they detailed in these articles related to other stuff that he might have been dealing with outside of the NFL, we had not heard anything publicly about Doug Martin from the time that he left the NFL to this unfortunate news on Sunday. And man, he had some damn good moments in the NFL and some damn great milestones set as a member of the Bucks. You just saw numerous people talking about how good of a player he was, and you saw numerous people mention this particular game in his rookie season. Per a quote from this Sports Illustrated article by River Wells a few days back, it states that Martin's big debut came during his rookie year on November 4th, 2012, when he ran for 4 rushing touchdowns and 251 yards against the Raiders. Those 4 touchdowns came in the first half of the game, which remains an NFL record for most rushing touchdowns in a half. It was also the 4th most rushing yards in a game for a rookie in NFL history and the 12th most overall in NFL history. End quote. I mean, the man was literally lighting it up as soon as he got out of college. And again, not a hardcore Bucks fan here, but even when I was sitting down and watching football, I always recall Doug Martin being a pretty solid running back, to say the least. And, his career is going to go down as a relatively solid one. He had multiple 1,400-yard rushing campaigns and multiple Pro Bowl nods to his name. But ultimately, a combination of injuries and personal problems would, by and large, end the prime of his career and then eventually his career in general. As this quote from the AP states, Martin was suspended for 4 games during an injury-filled 2016 season that caused him to miss the beginning of the 2017 season for violating the NFL's policy on performance-enhancing substances and entered a treatment facility rather than appeal the ban. End quote. I think I saw something that mentioned that this was related to him apparently using Adderall, and obviously that is not something that is going to be legal in this situation. He had to suffer the consequences, and it kind of cost him the rest of his tenure with the Bucks, as he would join the Raiders in just like a couple seasons later. He wasn't able to recapture that same early career magic he had with the team, and his production just kind of waned off by the time he left the NFL. But again, those who at least had an idea about that 4-year stretch of his Bucks career, again, the man was nicknamed the muscle hamster for a reason. Man, you could not tackle him on first contact. Even with him having a relatively small stature in terms of height, man, the man was bulked the fuck up. And, few defenses really were able to zone in on stopping him for long enough in a game to prevent the Bucks from at least having a chance to win. He will certainly be remembered in that early to mid 2010s portion of his career as possibly the staple of the Bucks franchise. Yes, they did get Mike Evans at this time, but obviously those Bucks teams, they were not that good. They were never that good. So, for him to have that talent and again have a combination of all of those different obstacles get in the way of him extending what might have truly been an even better career if he had been around for a little more time. it's just unfortunate to see. And then again, for those who weren't remotely close to him as a person, but again, who knew him as a player, it's hard to just fill in the gaps from his retirement all the way to his passing. There could have been a potential load of different things happening in the man's life that we didn't know anything about. And as a result, we're just going about our own ways in our own spaces. As, this different stuff may be developing in Doug Martin's life. We're not hearing anything about it for years and years and years on end up until we reach this point. But as is typically the case in some situations like this, and with how quickly things got out of hand, we would get a lot of different conversations to happen very quickly. Now, granted, some of this stuff you do have to take with a grain of salt because it is all we have, but obviously certain things are going to be spun certain ways, for one. And for two, all the information that might be correlating to whatever took place is not out yet. There's probably more to be found. But it's safe to say that Doug Martin's career, well, not career per se. His career did not end in the best possible way. And I guess whatever he might have tried to pursue afterwards in his life were riddled with some of the same things that we hear about in terms of players, if these reports are true, granted, kind of trying to grapple and struggling to grapple with the fact that they are no longer in the NFL, no longer the attention, or the focus of attention, rather. No longer having this grand spotlight on them on a weekly basis. No longer being able to, I guess, provide in some senses. And again, with that suspension that Doug Martin faced, apparently from a few things that I watched about his situation, he was apparently in line for a huge contract, and some clauses in that would not end up being met as a result of the suspension. So he never got that chance to capitalize truly on a big sum of money in the NFL. And again, when you have that happen and you potentially don't manage your money in the best ways, a number of different things can happen. But I say all that to say that he was just simply going through it. According to this quote from this USA Today article by Nate Davis, his agent made a statement that read this, quote, "Privately, Doug battled mental health challenges that profoundly impacted his personal and professional life. Ultimately, mental illness proved to be the one opponent from which Doug could not run." End quote. It is just heartbreaking to hear something like that. But again, even with Doug Martin potentially just trying to move on, and, he would be in Oakland at the time of this thing, which granted, this is his hometown. These are his stomping grounds, per se. It would just be hard to assume that he could just adjust right back into the normal lifestyle of, I guess, a typical citizen in that area without having to, prepare for different football stuff every day. And again, it's a drastic shift that can take place in the mindsets and in the physical actions of some of these athletes once they give up a playing career. It is truly a huge decision that you have to make. And even when you do make it, let's just say that you might not always be at peace with your decision. That's how a lot of these situations have gone. To be honest with you, it's man. And it's not like he didn't have, I guess, support around him trying to keep him, I guess, whole, trying to give him that spark of life that he would be looking for in a situation like this. And yet, again, if these things stand true, it might not have done enough. Like, there's a different situation here before we get into what would be alleged to have happened. I guess relating to his potential death here. And it just doesn't paint, the picture of a person who's all that well mentally. Again, this could be a narrative thing, but at the same time, this is not something that you can truly rule out. This same USA Today article has a quote here that states, according to a police report obtained by the San Francisco Chronicle, Martin descended into a psychotic episode while at a Northern California rehabilitation center in August. He was placed on a 72-hour psychiatric hold after jumping out of a second-story window at the facility. Yeah. End quote. It is just, it's wild stuff, man. Mental health is, again, gotta continue to stress it. It is truly a real thing. And it is very possible that Martin could have been dealing with all this post his playing career. I mean, if this stands true, this literally just happened a couple months ago. And it got to such a point where he had to spend time in rehab to try to get himself back on the right track. I couldn't even possibly envision a situation like that. I'm sure he was truly a trying man, trying to pick himself back up. But at times, man, it gets hard for some people. It truly does. So you had this happen here, and then we kind of get into some of the details that they mentioned in a couple of these articles. I would have to kind of alternate between both of the articles here, although they both do a good job of kind of at least giving us some sort of idea of what might have happened. It's not everything, though. Okay, so initially, we had no idea about what the cause was. But this would be one of the things that we heard about. Now, apparently leading up to it, as this quote states right here, Doug's parents were actively seeking medical assistance for him and had contacted local authorities for support. Feeling overwhelmed and disoriented, Doug fled his home during the night and entered a neighbor's residence 2 doors down, where he was taken into custody by police. End quote. So you're thinking, oh, okay, that is definitely awful if true. And I guess a number of people here, they even have to reference it in this USA Today article that, okay, when you see something like that going down with a former player in the NFL, you're going to be thinking about CTE. And again, the only way to find out something like that, if that is the case, is whether or not, let me get my words right. Hold on. The only way for you to truly be able to find that out is once the person in question is dead and you can examine their brain for signs and traces of that in their system and in their flow. So I'm sure that that's something that they could be checking for in time, but we just don't know that right now. So anything that you might hear about that, it just hasn't been proven yet. It's not unlikely, but, we just got to see more information come out about it. That's all I would say there. And it's like, dang, again, if that is true, if he did just get into that space, to get so disoriented and so just out of body, overwhelmed as they put it, you just get that impulse to go and try to do something to somebody else and invade their own property. It definitely, again, does not paint the best picture here. Because there's no telling what else might have taken place afterwards if, I guess, Martin was doing all this and wasn't taken into custody at that point. Those are situations that you have to treat with tremendous urgency, of course. And again, this is the same neighborhood. Now, I can't sit here and say that all these people in this neighborhood, because again, you got to account for people moving in and out of the space, but if it's his neighbor's house, there's a good chance you might have known this person. And again, even in between that situation in August and to now, other stuff might have gotten so out of hand, and Martin might have felt like too many things were getting out of control in his life. So any number of things could have been running through his head in that moment if that's what he chose to do. And so we get to this point where police take him into custody, right? And then, with a different ticker days later, I get a report that I'm like, I want to take with caution, and I need to take with caution. But again, if more information comes out and this also happens to be true, then we have a tremendous problem. Because that ticker on ESPN would then state that Martin apparently passed after a struggle of some sort with police. And we go instantly from 0 to extremely, extremely fucking high, if that stands to be true. We don't know, but as these, if I can find the right quotes on this AP article here, they state that, quote, Martin, 36, died after what police described as a brief struggle with officers who arrested him early Saturday while investigating a break-in at a home. He became unresponsive and was pronounced dead at a hospital, Oakland police said, end quote. To this point, they still don't have a direct, or I guess, clear cause for what exactly happened. That still doesn't, that still isn't known at this point, I should say. But it's again, now it changes the script completely. Like, yes, you could argue that Doug Martin might have truly been a man just struggling to get by at this point with some of what has been said at this point. But if you factor in a potential situation where he was restrained and had a struggle with these police officers in a forceful way to the extent of him suffering bodily harm and ultimately passing away from those things, you have a completely different narrative to look at here and a completely different context to talk about. And it would get incredibly ugly very quickly if this was true. Now, this quote also states how, I guess, they're trying to approach the situation. Many questions are unanswered, including how many officers were involved, how long they struggled with Martin, and how they restrained him. The officers who detained him have been placed on paid leave while the investigation continues as standard police practice, end quote. Now again, paid leave, that could seem a little suspicious. But, again, you naturally, if that is the standard, well, they're doing exactly what it is that you have to do. And you would just hope that the proper measures are taken for them to fairly and accurately look into a potential investigation and see what exactly transpired here. And again, from that might literally be going on right now as I'm making this video right here. A lot of different information could come out between times, between potential footage of what might have taken place with Doug Martin being arrested in this space. Maybe even some situations that led up to it in terms of like how exactly he got into the house. You know, it's one thing, again, there are too many just points of gray area here. So again, nothing's set in stone, and you do have to proceed with caution. Just try to continue tracking all the developments that come along with this. But there have been cases where, you know, there have been quotes stating how people have broken into certain places. And then you see camera footage and paints a completely different picture. That could be in play. I can't really speak to that right now. But that would be something to watch out for as well. Nevertheless, it's all just an unfortunate situation. You know, just incredibly young. Even if, again, we want to continue playing the game of calling people old when they're in their 30s. Like, he was still tremendously young at this point. Still had a lot of life ahead of him. To the point where, again, his family, you know, they know he's dealing with this, and they're still trying to give him all the support that they feel as though he may need. But I guess just that kind of added pressure may have, in one way or another, gotten to Martin. So you just get the unfortunate passing of a literal son to his parents, and I guess a beacon of just the potential of what people from Oakland, per se, can go on to do in their lives to so many people in that area. You know, we know that they've definitely had their rough points as a city throughout history, and I think that, you know, they've had a consistent amount of low points. That's been well documented. Yet between players like him and others from that area, namely Damian Lillard, between other just public figures from that area doing their best to, you know, represent them in a more positive way, in a more impactful way, and make change not just in other spaces in their own respective fields, but also just consistently giving back to those communities as well. definitely highly important stuff, and he's definitely going to be a missed member of that community as well, not just his family. But if this idea of him potentially being restrained and, I guess, having a forced struggle that in some way, shape, or form led to his passing, if this is true, it just it is just yet another representation of an ongoing cycle that just cannot stand from the social aspect and yet persists all the same for some odd reason. As this quote states right here, a huge chunk, but per the AP, black people accounted for a disproportionate number of people who died after being restrained, beaten, or shot with tasers by police officers in the U.S. According to a 3-year investigation by the Associated Press, black people of non-Hispanic descent made up about a third of more than 1,000 deaths that the AP documented over a decade, despite representing just 12% of the population. People suffering a mental health crisis also were among those particularly susceptible to force, especially if they were hallucinating and unable to understand commands, the investigation found. End quote. So you're dealing with not just one point of potential emphasis that could receive an enormous wave of backlash from multiple points, but also the second component of the fact that if, the mental health was getting that bad, potentially, for Doug Martin, it definitely could have made him even more disoriented to be dealing with the attention from cops at that point. I mean, you just have to look at the quote there. No, again, it's not going to be everything. But if it's true that he was feeling disoriented and overwhelmed before, allegedly, breaking into his neighbor's home, can we really sit here and say that those feelings, those emotions would change in a positive way while being surrounded by authorities? Or would that potentially worsen? And then that opens up a different can of worms. Because again, until video footage comes out, well, he can't really take anything for face value here. Like, any number of things could have happened while they were trying to, I guess, account for Doug Martin in that way. And yeah, there's definitely going to be a bit of resistance there if he's not in his right headspace. But so long as he was not intentionally trying to cause harm to these people, and again, that will be determined in the video footage. Once again, like, if he was trying to do something risque that put someone in danger, in genuine danger, and not just them saying, oh, I feared for my life, but then you turn on the body camera and again, you see a completely different picture in that regard with something just completely unwarranted. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about genuine danger, immediate, imminent danger. Well, again, that's the one side. But if it is as simple as just a struggle with restraint, and I guess you have people on these other ends resorting to a number of different measures to keep him down that might have, I guess, forcefully, even inadvertently, in the small chance that might be the case, kind of hurt Doug Martin enough in that way to start feeling that internally and have that work into his death, man, the decisions are certainly going to be made by the authorities in the event that certain things go certain ways, depending on how much more information we get. And again, if it all comes out and there's nothing there, well then, there's nothing there. But in the event that there is, they're definitely going to try to make their moves and get out in front of the situation. But the court of the public opinion, in cases like this, yeah, that is probably not something they want to be dealing with. Again, at the root of it all, it can be so easy to get caught up in those things. Of course, because again, you could be looking at the repetition of cycles. And you could be looking at the fact that this was just quite the unfortunate situation as well. At the end of the day, this is a man who, despite it all, the highs of his NFL career, the lows of his potential life after that, he was still, at the end of the day, just doing what he could to survive. And I mean, it got to a point where even in this USA Today article, you had Gerald McCoy, who was actually a teammate of his at the time, and he is now an NFL analyst. But he kind of spoke to, I guess, different qualities of Doug Martin. Not only remembering him as a teammate, but also kind of speaking to this notion that, everything's all good after life in pro sports for an NFL player. And I think that his whole tangent here is the perfect way to sum this up. I'm going to look at this whole thing right here and just read it out. So as this entire thing states, quote, Doug loved to dance. He loved to tell jokes. He loved to have a great time. Former Pro Bowl defensive jackal Jarrett McCoy, a teammate of Martin's with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, told The Athletic while expounding on the challenges NFL players face following their careers. Your identity has been tied to this game, and you find out after you're done playing, you don't even know who you are as a person. You get lost. That's where you see the depression. That's where you see the substance abuse. That's where you see people start making all these bad decisions. I just want people to understand it's tougher on us when we're done playing than you guys think, continued McCoy. It may seem like it's all glamorous. Look at the life you gotta live. Yeah, but mental illness is a real thing, and people struggle mentally after playing this game. It ain't just football, it's pro sports, period. Nothing can give you that high. So when it's gone, the cheers are gone. The competition is gone. The routine is gone. You get lost in that space, and it happens to a lot of athletes, man. And I just hope that wasn't what happened to Doug. End quote. Perfect summation of this. I don't think anybody would be wishing that on Doug Martin, but again, with a lot of the different stuff that we have, with the limited information that we've been given to this point, everything has to be taken into account. Again, who is to say that everything was perfect for him after leaving the NFL? I mean, when you look at an incident of him potentially jumping out of a 2-story window and then reportedly having all these mental health struggles off the field, that might have very well not, gone in the most positive way for him. And he might have truly again been going through some of the darkest moments he had ever gone through in his life to this point. Because for him, even if his career might have been short, you're spending day to day in film rooms and weight rooms, getting your body right, getting the conditioning process together, making sure you're as healthy as possible, getting all the right stuff in your body and in your system, and just doing whatever it is you could behind the scenes on a week-to-week basis to get ready to play. While also, again, I'm sure, again, he leaves behind, very close loved ones in his own family that he may very well have been trying to build over these years. But even then, during an NFL season, you're not going to be able to spend a whole lot of time with them. And that kind of stuff can eat away at you, which is why that kind of factor plays a decision in some people choosing it to call a career, even when it happens to be early. You miss out on those opportunities because at the moment, playing out football becomes your life. Even when it comes to the media and experiencing different things relating to that between press conferences and other, advertisements potentially, that is just something else that comes with the territory, and it eats up your time. To where, if you're not managing your stuff in a way that works well for you, well, you lose sight of some of those other things that become important of your life, and you lose some of those opportunities for you to start building up, different ventures and different interests beyond football, using the platform that you have as a player to expand to a greater extent beyond that and become something even more. And, continuing to wrap yourself up in that lifestyle once at any moment, because again, now we're getting into the shelf life of running backs. The minute any player, though, makes a mistake, a brutal mistake that gets in the way of their playing career and what they know is their current life, well, just like that can come to a screeching halt and a potential stop. Unfortunately, those things meshed for Doug Martin by the end of his career. Him getting suspended for that violation did not help, and he, again, had a just underwhelming ending to his NFL career. He acknowledged that he definitely made a tremendous mistake by doing what he did. But even at that point, I'm sure that he still had a tremendous passion to play. And once that, the idea of even just stepping back out onto the NFL field as Doug Martin, as the muscle hamster, as soon as that faded away, maybe something drastically shifted in his head. And it just led him down a, again, truly, truly dark path that he might have felt as though he had no help in getting through. Only he could walk it and experience it for what it was. So it's you can have all these different hypotheticals get thrown around, of course, but at the end of the day, It's just not something that you would want to see happen to anybody. No matter what. Because there were still people completely backing him, completely in his corner, who were not abandoning him, even in these moments. And because of some form of some miscommunication somewhere, a life of a truly impactful individual to his community and a completely valued and loved member of his family is now lost. And again, we still don't know exactly what happened. The family, wanted to come out with their statement and clear things up, but at the end of the day, they themselves are still, unfortunately, seeking out their own bit of clarity. And I would just say that again, yeah, you're going to have all these different conversations, but, we just have to see what else is coming out about this. I think a number of different people, especially his family, kind of need to see what the next steps are, or at least what exactly, again, is not being told, so that we can get more of an idea as to how to continue to, approach this situation. And then also move forward from it. Although, again, you can't take away the memories that he put on display for so many people. And I guess that's the one thing about it as well. Again, crucial in situations like this. Because I'm sure that, again, you just have to value those people most while they're around. Not when they pass away. To get into some other developments here, L'Jarius Sneed, Sauce Gardner, Nwangwu, and Javon Holland would all come out of their respective games on Sunday. And I don't know if any of them are set to return for next week just yet. However, they did get a report out that stated that Bryce Young would be out for next week's game with a high ankle sprain. Michael Penix Jr. is also currently day-to-day with a bone bruise injury. And some positive news for the Eagles here. They obviously just had Zadarius Smith retire. And with that vacancy opened up, a long-time Eagle and maybe a legend in that organization would give them a second look, despite recently retiring himself. And essentially he said, you know what, hey, I'm going to come back, I'm going to give this thing a chance, and we'll try to run this shit back. None other than Brandon Graham would come back out of retirement to join the Eagles. Leading up to it, they made different allusions to it. I guess it was something that he was strongly considering. And then, he just made the call. So he's going to be suiting back up for them. I don't know for how long. But, that does give the Eagles just another dangerous individual to have on that defensive line. A person who does still know the defensive game plan pretty well, even if he has been at home for all this time. And again, they're just getting even more depth behind that kind of defensive line as it is. That just helps tremendously, even if it is possibly for the short term. Dre Greenlaw apparently would be suspended for a single game by the NFL. Because apparently, as this article from NFL.com states, the NFL said in a statement that Greenlaw chased after referee Brad Allen and verbally tried to threaten him as he tried to leave the field. Or verbally threatened him as he tried to leave the field. End quote. I'm like, what? Again, not watching this Giants-Broncos game live, so I didn't see it happen. But I was just so confused. I'm like, what? Okay, he got suspended. What the hell could he have possibly gotten suspended for? Okay, well, there you go. I don't know. I guess my question would be, what made Greenlaw, why would you want to do that? Like, the game came down to the wire for sure, so emotions are going to be high. But at that point, like, you won the game. I mean, why would you feel the need to take out some sort of action on Brad Allen here if you won already? I don't really get that. And it just makes this extremely comical to me. But I suppose I'd have to actually see what transpired. And I'm sure it's going to shock the hell out of me whenever I can get around to doing just that. Haason Reddick is going to get an MRI on a knee injury. But a big piece of news here. The Titans would fucking release Tyler Lockett. They granted his wish and they freed my boy, man. They freed him. Yes, sir, man. It is just like, yo, they were disrespecting the shit out of him. Now, I understand that he is getting a little older. And, yeah, his kind of impact as a player might be on the decline. Don't get me wrong, but he is still a valuable wide receiver. And for this man to be relegated to Tennessee, granted, it was so tough to have to get in a spot where they let Tyler Lockett go in the first place. But look, when you are a 30-plus wide receiver in Tennessee, what the hell do we say all the time about players who do that shit? Okay? We saw it with Randy Moss. We saw it with Andre Johnson. And we've seen it with countless others. You saw it with D-Hop. He was okay, but, bro, they were misutilizing him too. When you are a 30-plus wide receiver going into a season as a free agent with the Titans, they are literally setting you up to fail in having your career die out right in front of your eyes. Every single time. For this man in 7 games to start in just one, despite again being flooded with multiple rookies, getting good and better opportunities over Tyler Lockett, that makes no sense in the first place. But the man had just 10 receptions for 70 yards. Now again, yes, is he going to be the focal point of that offense? Probably not, but damn. The man is a moving, walking first down. And you know that he's going to protect himself. Like, he may not always be able to blow you away with his speed, but he's going to find the soft spot in the zone. He's going to be an option as a safety valve, especially in a case where you have Cam Ward being a rookie trying to make some of the easiest reads possible. Why wouldn't you look in Tyler Lockett's direction far more often than just 21 times on the season? Like, that's criminal. And the Titans, again, overall are just bad. But for them to be like this, yeah, makes sense. Makes all the more sense for Tyler Lockett to get the hell out of there. Why would he want to keep spending his time there? knowing that he's not getting utilized, and even if there's not a direct correlation with that, team is fucking trash. I don't know if he'd get picked up by anybody, but I mean, man, the move was just always weird and unfortunate in the first place. And it clearly hasn't been panning out for him. The Titans also, again, are just a bad organization. So, I don't know where he would go next, man. A return is always possible to the Seahawks, of course. Like, you gotta retire as a Seahawk, man. It's just weird to spend any time in Tennessee at this point. But even if Seattle isn't the team that picks him back up, man, at least to somewhere where we know that he would be utilized in a much better way than this. Amazon Prime and the NFL, yesterday actually, would agree on essentially a global display of their Black Friday game this season. Obviously, that's going to take place between the Eagles and the Bears on Thanksgiving week. And as this quote states right here, it'll be the first NFL event to be presented globally on Prime Video, which is available in over 240 countries and territories around the world. End quote. Now, the quality of some of the Black Friday games, yeah, they've not been that great. I still go back to thinking about the one that they had in 2023 between the damn Jets and the Dolphins and how atrociously bad that shit was. Why am I thinking about that all these years later with that being such a bad game? I don't know. But this Eagles-Bears matchup, with the routes that both of these teams have taken this season and to start it off, that could be a promising one later on in the, height of the season. So I don't have a problem with them making that move at all from that perspective. You're incorporating the Super Bowl champions, and obviously a massive global audience consistently tunes into the Super Bowl. So in some way, because everybody everywhere in every country is not keeping up with the fucking NFL consistently on a week-to-week, day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. That would just be illogical to think. But for those who do typically tune in as a part of the global audience for the Super Bowl, well, hey, for those guys, this is going to be their first time watching the Eagles play since that point. And, although it's not a lot of consistency per se, it builds a little bit of potential for audience members to start tuning back into football more consistently beyond just watching the Super Bowl. Because you get them taking on another promising team in the Bears in regular season action. It kind of builds it up early and, I guess, creates the potential for even more people to become reinvested in watching the full progression of an NFL season before we get to the big game. And I don't think that's an aspect of it that really gets talked about all that much. But that's just a nice way to look at it. And this is just going to be very stacked in multiple ways. The first way would come from, obviously, all the logistical components of how it's going to go. As part of this quote states right here, the Bears versus Eagles Black Friday football game stands at the center of an unprecedented lineup of live sports programming on November 28th. Available in over 240 countries and territories with no subscription or Prime membership required. The global presentation of Black Friday football on Prime Video will feature additional language options for viewers around the world that include Spanish, French, and Portuguese. In addition, several advanced features that enhance Prime Video's NFL coverage in the US will also be available in select locations worldwide, including rapid recap, high-definition HDR video, and next-gen stats powered by AWS. The game will also be available on mobile devices in the United States with an NFL Plus subscription, and outside the United States through NFL Game Pass on DAZN for paid subscribers. End quote. Yeah, lots of different avenues are being implemented here to ensure that a number of different people can watch it. Hey, big thing is that you don't need a subscription or a Prime membership. Like, that just goes a long way for so many people. So that's obviously important to highlight first. Then different language options, because obviously there are going to be some language barriers. And I guess in that case, you're going to have different people in different countries who do this kind of work get their shot at covering the NFL, which is something that could potentially set a precedent in those respective fields. And also just the different features that they have in these games. It'll be interesting to see how they keep track of that overseas as well. Because again, not only do you have to account for getting that out to the masses in real time, but you are also likely going to have to translate said data in multiple different ways simultaneously. Bandwidth and connection is always going to be a huge question. And that's what's going to make it all go. So they will definitely have to get that sorted out in the next few weeks. They got some time. But they're going to start hitting the ground running. If they haven't already, they very much need to. And yeah, it is not just, as I kind of alluded to, it is not just the NFL on that day. There's a lot of different stuff that goes on Black Friday generally in sports, man. Like, obviously, big one would be college football, from my estimation. At least a few games, even if they're not going to be the top tier ones up until you get on the Saturday following Black Friday. Yeah, you're going to get some pretty good action there. But on this day specifically, they are not playing around. They are trying to get something in for at least a good portion of people, even if global masses might not all be at one point of time truly interested in the sport. The options are out there. Because this same article goes on to mention that in the morning on this day, they have action from the PGA Tour with some of the best golfers in that respective sport, including, as this article states right here, Tommy Fleetwood, Justin Thomas, Xander Schauffele, and Keegan Bradley. Namely, Schauffele. Yeah, he has been having himself a bit of a time. One of the names I've been consistently hearing about as a person who doesn't even watch golf all that much. Him and Scheffler. And Thomas has proven to be an established veteran in the game who also has done a tremendous amount in terms of his contributions to the sport. So you got some pretty big names there. And then that's before the Black Friday game. Now, obviously, they can say Eastern time for the specific hour and minute information. But at the same time, them time zones are nothing to play about. That could look different for everyone. And you could have a bit of an issue there as well. But that is legitimately how it is set up. That can't be controlled. Nevertheless, you'll have the Black Friday action between the pregame, the game itself, and then postgame action. And then, I guess, something new that they're implementing because of them now being a part of media rights with the NBA, they have a pair of Black Friday basketball games. One between the Bucks and the Knicks, and one between the Mavericks and the Lakers. So yeah, they did not come without a hell of a fucking plan to just get multiple people in multiple spaces around the world completely hyped up to watch some sports on Black Friday. And again, at the same time, do the ritual of, trying to get some shopping going, since all the deals are going to be kicking in. And it'll certainly get crowded, and that'll get a bit contested for some people. But it's all a part of that specific moment in the year. That's how it goes. It should be pretty fun stuff. Now, as they state right here, when it comes to their, efforts here, according to a quote from the NFL article and from Hans Schroeder, expanding the availability of our games to NFL fans around the world is a key priority for us, and we are thrilled that the Black Friday game will be available through Amazon in over 240 countries and territories around the world. End quote. Do I totally buy that statement? Especially the first part of it. When it comes to the next development, sure, the NFL is definitely trying to expand their fan base. There's no question about that. But from an availability standpoint, with things getting more and more expensive across multiple sports just to keep up with certain teams, let alone the entirety of these leagues, putting people into steep financial holes in their budgets. It could be a priority in this situation because it would be most convenient to you at this time. But generally speaking, I don't know if I can sit here and say that I agree with that wholeheartedly or believe that that is the case. This is clearly, that is definitely PR there's just, you ain't gonna come out and say it. Of course you aren't. But, bruh, you're not slick, man. And if that is the case, well then, this wouldn't be a one-time thing. And we're going to see how that ends up being. Not even a one-time thing per year. Of course, working that multiple times and overdoing it could become an issue. Because again, you got to consistently work on resetting all of these different checkpoints up to ensure that, again, it runs as smoothly as possible. There is a lot that goes into it over a vast amount of time. So logistically, that could be a nightmare. That could be. I understand that. But if you're just limiting it to this year and just doing away with it, well, you're not living up to what exactly you're trying to express with that state. But that's neither here nor there. Either way, that should be tremendous fun for so many different people in so many different areas of the world. No question about it. And that is the goal at the end of the day. It's also no different here. The Pro Bowl games, per Roger Goodell and a report on NFL.com, the Pro Bowl games are moving to Super Bowl week. The coverage, as the article states, it's going to be the same. ESPN's going to handle all that along with different families under the overall Disney Corporation. Voting's still going to be intact, but again, that could also make things interesting for, I guess, media coverage when it comes to the Super Bowl. And they are also doing this to, again, continue expanding, I guess, awareness of the rise in flag football, and also giving a little preview of, I guess, exhibitions and things like that, because obviously they're hosting the Olympics in LA. They have a flag football event. And what better time for them in this situation? Not even necessarily worrying about the quotes here. What better time for them to go full throttle in promoting that than during the biggest week of the season, where the most people around the world have the most eyes on the league and on the sport? It is a smart business move. And again, it gives these people a tremendous amount of exposure on a national, maybe international scene when it comes to playing flag football. Like, that is a hell of a way to expedite that process. But from the standpoint of, I guess, conflicting with media coverage, yeah, like, you're going to be running that, but then you have particular days set out for media day with different players who are going to be participating in the big game. And one, yeah, ESPN is going to be doing a lot of that coverage, but I'm sure they're going to have some of their people in some of these conference rooms as well when it comes to the players who are going to be participating in the Super Bowl as it is. Then, not to mention, like, moving it all the way back there, man, bad blood between, I guess, teams and players who might have last faced each other in the conference championship game could still very much exist. And yes, that might be a lighter component to it, but that is a real possibility. So you mean to tell me that you're really trying to run the risk of having different situations of tension break out because you're going to have a player on the losing end and a player on the winning side about to play in the biggest game of their life get into it with each other because of what happened weeks ago? And I don't know if that's something you want to deal with personally. I got to be honest about that. And then, not to mention, this could be interesting. And honestly, I don't even think that would have a chance of happening because that's just something they would never do. But you have to wonder then, if they would at least give players who are participating in the Super Bowl an option to play in the Pro Bowl or not if they were a person who was voted in. Yes, that completely does away with the need for alternatives, but at the same time, you're not expecting them to get into anything physical in what is now a flag football event. Now, if they're dealing with injury, that's off the fucking table. They need to rest up and get ready for the game. But if they're healthy, they've been voted as a Pro Bowler, maybe they considered asking them whether or not they want to still participate in the Pro Bowl. I guess maybe some time in advance since they have enough space now to get things set up. And I guess if they don't, well, they'll continue to go along with what they're doing. And if they do, well, again, an alternative might lose out on their spot. But hey, you get to see a person who was legitimately voted as one of the better players at a particular position participate amongst other players in a lighthearted, non-contact event. And that would just add to the allure of putting this all on exhibition for entertainment. I don't know, though. I guess we'll see about it. But, before capping it off, Jayden Daniels would also be confirmed to be out with a hamstring injury, making that game against the Chiefs exponentially tougher with an already vaunted defense. Man, oh man. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.